Just letting you guys know you can listen to my No Bleeps podcast anywhere you stream podcasts or on my No Bleeps YouTube channel. Link in the description. Hey guys, it's Billy and welcome back to Sesh. Today we have got to talk about this Trisha Paytas and Ethan Klein situation because Trisha Paytas has said that they are stepping down from Frenemies following the most recent Frenemies episode. There's been a lot of drama going on, a lot of tweets, a lot of uploads. Let's get into what has been going on between the two of them. I'm first going to basically tell you guys what happened in the episode that came out on Monday on the membership only H3 podcast channel. Basically, if you pay the membership, then you could have seen the episode. And a lot of people were really begging Ethan not to post the actual episode live to the public because of how bad it was, because him and Trisha get into a fight and it really didn't look good. It really was not okay. And Trisha came out with a video saying that they were stepping down from Frenemies before the episode was made public to everybody. And so there was a lot of confusion because people that did not pay for the H3 podcast membership didn't know what Trisha was talking about in their video. They didn't really understand why Trisha was stepping down from Frenemies. And there were just a ton of comments within the membership comment section begging Ethan to not post it, mend things behind the scenes with Trisha. And honestly, it doesn't seem like that is happening right now. The two of them are fighting even more than they were in the episode. And the episode did end up going live to the public. Now, this isn't something new in terms of this isn't the first time that the two of them have gotten into an argument and Trisha has said that they were going to be quitting the podcast. But honestly, this situation has a lot to do with the business, has a lot to do with money, has a lot to do with the fans. Even their most beloved fans, the people that pay money to watch their podcast, are questioning whether they want to continue to support the podcast after this episode. So let's get into what went down. The podcast episode title is Talking About Gabby Hanna. And I watched the whole thing through. I watched Trisha's video afterwards talking about why they would be stepping down from the podcast. So I have some notes and I noted that at the very beginning of this episode, there's a weird vibe. I felt like there was tension between Ethan and Trisha and he was really like not having any of the things that they were saying. Being very short with Trisha and just didn't really care for the fact that they were promoting their skincare line. It felt almost like to me they had a prior argument or prior conversation before recording that Ethan did not like. And so while they were recording, he already felt like he was walking on eggshells. And someone on the crew, while they were talking about the entire skincare line, joked about moldy products. And they were obviously talking about Jaclyn Hill. And Trisha goes, "Oh, but we're Team Jaclyn now." And Ethan says, "Well, you just tell me who to hate and who to like." He seemed super annoyed that he has to base his likeness of other people based on how Trisha feels about that person and what would upset Trisha and how to like avoid that entirely. And Trisha then says that they have been feeling quite hateful today. And boy, does that play out later on. They get into talking about Gabby Hanna, which a lot of people have a lot of issues with because in, the more recent times, I've even talked about how Trisha has really strayed away from talking about people that are trying to start drama with them, just based on the fact that Trisha has kind of realized that people might just be using their name or making them upset to try to get Trisha to make a video about them, use their name in a title, and ultimately get that person views and attention. And Trisha has sort of realized that and been like, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to give unnecessary attention to people that I do not like. But they did decide to talk about the Gabby Hanna situation because of the BuzzFeed article. I made a whole video on why Trisha was upset with BuzzFeed and Gabby Hanna, because Gabby Hanna was essentially blaming Trisha Paytas for ruining her career, and it was a big old mess. I don't know why Gabby Hanna thinks that Trisha Paytas ruined her career. A lot of people were just like, Trisha, why are you falling into this trap? Do not talk about Gabby on this podcast. Trisha has said multiple times that when Gabby is being brought up, they are not okay, and it is extremely triggering. And so I think the topic in itself should have just been avoided because it really did make the whole environment of them recording the podcast probably like not that amazing, and what ultimately led to what happens later on in the podcast. Some things that Trisha did add about Gabby is that apparently Gabby is going to be doing a 12-part series on Trisha. I don't understand why that would need to be a thing, but That just sounds really weird, and I don't like any bit of that. I hope that's not true. Trisha did end up making a video on their Trisha Paytas channel going off on Gabby Hanna, saying that they did not approve of the Gabby Hanna name in the title of the podcast episode. Trisha was trying to make it clear that she does not like Gabby Hanna, does not want to give Gabby Hanna satisfaction, and that she's not a good person. That's what they said in their video. After this, after they start talking about Gabby, they start eating pizza. And this is always when the drama starts, when they order pizza. And even Ethan says they should not have ordered pizza. It's the pizza curse, because whenever they eat pizza or order pizza, they argue and they have a fight, and it's not good. Basically, they were about to do a fan advice segment, and Trisha was not having any bit of that. They said that they don't like this segment and that it's a stupid segment, and says it's dumb and like something that people do when they run out of ideas and start doing Q&A videos on YouTube. Then it gets really awkward, because we come to find out later that one of the new hires for the crew of H3 Productions was the one that came up with the idea to do this Q&A fan advice segment. And so Ethan is just kind of sitting there uncomfortable, like, let's not, bash this idea, because obviously that was someone's idea. It's rude to say that it's dumb and stupid. And so it's really awkward. And Trisha says once again that it is dumb. And then Trisha says it just seems like a lazy podcast if they do that. And then Ethan says, lazy podcast? We do all the work for it. You just show up. And Trisha says, OMG, yeah, right. Ethan says, where am I wrong? And Trisha says, I always contribute. I think that something that we need to understand is that this is the H3 Podcast YouTube channel. On the H3 Podcast YouTube channel, they have the H3 Podcast, H3 After Dark, and Frenemies. This is not the Frenemies YouTube channel. This is not a combined Trisha and Ethan channel. Trisha is coming into H3 Productions, working for them, basically as talent, because she's on Frenemies. Yes, Frenemies is this big, massive podcast. And, obviously they probably didn't think that it was going to be this big, massive thing when they first started it, but now it is. And I do think that they need to sit down with lawyers and they need to figure out kind of the logistics of maybe the money, have contracts set so Trisha can see very clearly what is going to where, because it seems like it's been a little confusing for Trisha what money is going where, who owns what power Ethan has. Because for the longest time, I think as a viewer, everyone was just pretty much under the assumption Trisha's talent, they come in once a week, sit down, film, leave, go home, and that's it. Because Ethan is the one that is running this business, running this company. He is the one that is hiring the people, employing the people, paying the people, doing the payroll, making sure that everybody is doing their job. He's paying people to do the audio mixing, record the audio, record the stuff, edit the podcast, post the podcast, write the captions for the podcast, write the description for the podcast, post on social media. Like, he is paying people to do all of those things, where Trisha just comes in, she shows up and she does her thing and then she goes home. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just seems like Trisha didn't understand what the roles were and where the money was going in order to pay all the people that need to be paid to do all those jobs, and the cost of actually paying those people. Because during this podcast, it seems like Trisha is not very happy with the fact that Ethan is getting 5% more than Trisha, and that he gets the full amount for whatever they make on the highlights of the podcast. And Ethan is saying that extra money is for production costs. And I think when he said production costs, Trisha's not really thinking about how much money actually it takes to pay all the people that are working behind the camera. Trisha then brings up to Ethan that they feel like Ethan just recycles H3 content onto Frenemies, and that he talks about the same topics on H3 After Dark and H3 Podcast on Frenemies. And Trisha says again that they don't like the advice segment. Trisha says they don't like the ideas Ethan has and has been going along with these ideas, but they have to start speaking up because some things are just not good ideas. And Ethan is brutal and asks why Trisha is attacking him. Then Trisha starts talking about the fact that they did not like that the last Frenemies podcast title was announcing like the pregnancy, and it was very similar to the H3 podcast title. And Trisha felt like that had already been done and didn't know why they were recycling titles. And Ethan says it's because they talked a lot about Hila's pregnancy in that episode. Trisha says they don't understand why it wasn't more creative. I will say, and I've been seeing this a lot in the comments, that I think some people really just watch one of the shows. There are a lot of people that just come to watch Frenemies and that's it, and they never would have known that Hila was pregnant because they don't watch the other podcasts. And so Trisha saying that they recycle content, it's not like people are tired of hearing the same thing over again. There's a lot of people that will just be hearing it for the first time, and I think that's why they talk about some of the topics multiple times. Ethan then says, "Why are you so angry?" And Trisha is like, "I promise you I'm not angry." And then he says to Trisha, "You need to admit when you're angry," and says that he feels like he's being gaslit. And then Trisha says that they feel like they're being gaslit. And Trisha then starts to vent about how they're not happy with the workplace environment, including not having a say in people that they are hiring around them, hiring in the crew. Ethan is completely shook. He's like, "Why would I ask you about people that I hire?" That is shocking in itself for Ethan, because he's looking at this as H3 is my company. Why would I ask you about my company? You come here as a guest, you come here as talent. Why would I ask you about the crew? This is clearly a conversation that they need to be having off camera. This is not something that they should be talking about in front of the crew. They're talking about pay. They're talking about worth. They're talking about, how much people should be paid for doing the job that they're doing literally in front of them. It's very uncomfortable and it's definitely unprofessional. This is not a conversation that they should be having in public. Trisha then is talking about how Ethan takes this 5% and the budget for paying the crew. Ethan is super uncomfortable talking about this. You can see it all over his face. I just don't understand where Trisha didn't know that Frenemies was just a branch of the H3 company. I thought everybody knew that Frenemies was an H3 production. I mean, that's just clear as day. It's on the H3 podcast YouTube channel. Frenemies is not its own thing. And if they had wanted it to be its own thing from the very beginning, that's a conversation that they definitely should have had. That's a conversation that they should have. I think moving forward, if that is what they want, they need to figure that out, because clearly Trisha is uncomfortable with the H3 crew. Sounds like Trisha wants an entirely new crew that the two of them can hire together to do all that they're doing now. Whereas Ethan is kind of like, this is my crew that I use every single day, and they just help us do Frenemies as well. So towards the end, he says that he feels once again that Trisha is gaslighting him and feels like Trisha is frustrated and upset. And Trisha is like, I'm not even upset. Even though the conversation is clearly really tense and very uncomfortable for everyone, Ethan then says, okay, you're not upset. You're in perfect condition right now. And Trisha says, wow, that's crazy. We have to end it right now. Because they were upset that Ethan was like sarcastically saying, oh yeah, sure, you're okay. You're not upset. And that was very triggering for Trisha. Ethan just says, okay. Trisha says, please. Like, they want to end the podcast so bad. And Ethan says it's the pizza curse and says that he shouldn't have to walk on eggshells around Trisha. And Trisha just says they want to end the podcast, and they basically end it, and Trisha walks off nearly about to cry. Ethan does say sorry before they end the podcast, but the whole thing is very, very, very uncomfortable. A lot of people are reacting to this negatively. You know, people feel like Trisha was out of line for a lot of things that were brought up, did not like how they were talking about the cut of the profit and not acknowledging that they were upset. But obviously, I think that's a personal situation that Trisha just has to work out on their own. They uploaded a video on their channel stepping down from Frenemies and went into depth about the situation and said that after reading comments, they felt like they needed to say something about stepping down from the Frenemies podcast because everything just really was a little too much, and said that they love doing the show, but it's with a heavy heart that they need to step down. And the members only episode went up, and the the reaction that they saw from people really upset them. And Trisha says that they did not feel right about the episode and things that were said. Trisha says that money is not an issue and was just under the impression that most of Ethan's cut went to crew and stuff. They thought it was 50-50. The way that I'm hearing it, it sounds like they are getting 50-50 of the podcast, except Ethan makes 5% more on the podcast technically, but that 5% goes to the production costs, which is paying for the employees, paying for equipment that they need, paying for pizza probably. Whereas Trisha's cut, they don't have to pay for the employees. They take their money and they go home. It's not like Ethan is taking 5% more and pocketing it. He is the one distributing the money. If Trisha wants 50-50 that bad, then they could do 50-50 and then 2.5% of whatever they're making could go to the crew, and then 2.5% of whatever he's making could go to the crew. If they want to be 50-50 about it, I think he's really taking extra so that Trisha does not have to deal with having to pay people. It's also not Trisha's company, so technically Trisha shouldn't even have to be paying the employees because this is an H3 production. Frenemies is a massive show, but Frenemies is not a company. The company is H3 Productions. In this case, Trisha does not own H3 Productions. The names under that company are Ethan and Hila. This is something they should have worked out in the very beginning. They wanted Frenemies to be its own company. They should have made Frenemies its own YouTube channel, its own thing. Then they would have had power of hiring people, distributing money, all of that stuff. But technically, this is like how the CW owns Vampire Diaries, and Nina Dobrev, the main character on the show, is not paying the camera guy. CW is paying the camera guys. But the most confusing statement to me that Trisha makes is saying that if they knew they were coming in as a third H3 show, they said, I, hand to God, wouldn't have done it. And this is really confusing to me because I think everybody was under the impression this is a third H3 show because this is on the H3 podcast channel. Trisha is just there talking about this stuff. Of course, Trisha has a major, I'm not trying to downplay the work that Trisha has done on this podcast. Trisha has a major part in this podcast. And in terms of owning the podcast, of course, Trisha should have a hand in that. And that's something that they need to renegotiate in private. But in terms of how they established the podcast, this was always seemingly to everybody an H3 third show. I don't know where it got lost upon Trisha that this was its own individual company where they had the power to hire individual employees for Frenemies. But Trisha did agree that this all should have just been brought up off camera and was apologizing to fans. It was honestly quiet for a little bit of time and people didn't know whether or not the episode was going to go live because, like I said, most of this happened while the video was still only members only. Once the video went live, it just was downhill from there, and Trisha uploaded a video titled One More Thing where they talked about the crew, talked about the money thing, saying it's not about money for them. They wanted Frenemies to be its own thing, separate from H3 content, and honestly did kind of diss some of the crew members working for H3, saying that they're more like actors and not really camera guys or audio guys. Ethan had tweeted out, I'm honestly gutted over this whole thing. Trisha's video this morning was a total surprise to me. I don't really know what more I can say or do. I'm very sorry to all the fans of Frenemies. I know how much it meant to everyone. I did everything I humanly could to save it. Trisha made a long comment underneath the Frenemies episode saying, hey guys, I see a lot of your comments and you think I'm making a mistake or being unreasonable. I hear you and I'm not here to combat that. I'm leaving to ease the tension everywhere. I don't want to be the toxicity in their machine, and I can feel that I am, and it's not good for anyone involved. I'm sorry so many of you are disappointed in me or that you only became a fan of me again through the show, but I cannot continue. If this makes me look selfish or a brat, so be it. I'm grateful for the opportunity, but it just is not good for me mentally anymore, and it could be my own brain attacking me for myself right now. I just need to disengage completely. This is without a doubt the hardest decision I've ever made, and it definitely was the most successful thing I've been a part of. So it's with a heavy heart that I cannot continue. I'm so sorry from the bottom of my heart. I don't know what else to say or how to convey what I'm going through right now without making things worse, and I'm clearly terrible at explaining my emotions and thoughts right now. Again, I'm sorry to disappoint, and that's all I can say. Later on, Trisha and Ethan start going at it on Twitter, and this is truly when just a lot of things hit the fan, and a lot of people just feel like there's no going back to Frenemies. Although, they've been in fights before, so I do feel like it's a possibility that Frenemies might still happen once again, but these tweets are really bad. Trisha starts exposing screenshots and all of this stuff, and Ethan is tweeting out about how the crew is getting hated on. They're getting messages from Trisha fans upset at the crew because the crew didn't want to work with Trisha because they felt like Trisha had been disrespectful to them. And so it was a very big mess. And some of the messages that Trisha were exposing were Ethan trying to explain to them where the money was going for the production costs. And Trisha says, you keep switching. Is it to pay the employees, production costs, or is it the merch now? Like, what is it? And I honestly just think that Trisha is confused about what production costs actually are. Production costs is a blanket statement for a bunch of different things. Paying the crew, feeding the crew, getting the equipment, just electricity bills, like all those things are production costs. Anything that makes the show go on, that's a production cost. A lot of people took this as Trisha being very entitled, feeling like Trisha wants more money from Frenemies. They continue tweeting saying, I can't scream enough. I don't want more money. I want to have a say in where some of the highlight money goes to because that's what we agreed on, production costs. Trisha says, he asked me why I should have a say in new hires because I was under the impression Frenemies money would pay part of someone's salary. I don't know, it turned into this huge thing. I also just want to add that one of the text messages really raised a red flag to a lot of people because Trisha screenshotted something that she had sent to Ethan and people were not happy with a portion of the conversation. So he basically was talking to her about the money, how they were going to split the revenue. He said, would you be okay with 55-45? I think the other stuff might not add up to enough. She said, LOL, okay. He said, how about 60-40? Just kidding. Sorry, I know it's lame. I was just thinking about it a little more. And she said, OMG, I was like so Jewy. And everybody was quite upset at that statement right there. That's just something that everybody was pointing out on Twitter. So I just wanted to mention that. There was also another point last night where Trisha was saying that they are the talent, they are bringing in these views for Frenemies, the H3 channel, and so they deserve to have a say in who's working there and where the money is going. I definitely do think that there's just a lot of miscommunication here. I think that Ethan views Trisha as just an actor on a television show. Yeah, you make us a lot of money at the company, but that doesn't mean you have powers here at the company. I definitely do think that Trisha deserved to have a point person, whether it be an assistant, someone that could advocate for them on the set of Frenemies. As of right now, both of them have deleted most of their tweets from last night. This morning, Trisha did upload a video onto their channel titled I'm Sorry, basically apologizing to the fans once again for this entire situation. It's a 14-minute long video, and as of right now, it seems like Frenemies isn't going to be happening next week or anytime soon. I really don't know. Like I said, this is not the first time that Trisha has quit the show, but people do feel like this time it is a lot more real. The drama is very heavy, and obviously it's way more complicated because they're freaking family at this point. Because Trisha is about to marry Moses, and Ethan is her brother-in-law. This whole thing, it's a very big mess. I definitely want to know what you guys think about literally all of this. This is definitely a really crazy situation. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.